The last time that I talked about the reTerminal, I had mentioned the E10-1, but it wasn't available yet. Well, it's available now and I've gotten my hands on one. So in this video, I'm going to unbox it and set it up on my unit. So let's start by seeing the features of it first. Now I'll point out that it says that some of these items are optional. For the one that I've gotten, it came with all of these items, and as far as I can see, there's not a SKU that exists yet where you can get a unit without these apparently optional things. But what comes in the box is, let's see, they say the high-speed interface. That's just the connector on the back for connecting it to the reTerminal. You get 2 serial ports on it. One is an RS-485 and the other one is an RS-232. Battery holders. So it will take 18650 batteries. It does not come with the batteries. You have to supply your own. It has both an M.2 and a PCIe socket inside of it. You can use one or the other. You can't use both at the same time. And it also has a position for holding a SIM slot should you decide to put a cellular modem within this. Gigabit Ethernet. So yes, once you connect this, your reTerminal has both its built-in Ethernet plus the one that's on the E10-1. It has a speaker. They don't have this listed on here, but it has microphones too, so it can record audio. And it also has a cooling fan. And I would suggest going ahead and turning that cooling fan on. It can be completely controlled from within software. But if you don't have it turned on, I did find that the heatsink gets substantially warm. I wasn't comfortable with that, so I just keep the fan turned on. And the fan's pretty quiet. So let's open the box and actually see what's inside. So it comes with a paper that pretty much spells out everything that is in the box and how to connect it. There's a bag of screws for connecting either the PCIe or the M.2 device. It does come with a little Phillips screwdriver that you can use for opening it up. And then of course there's the device itself. So that's everything that's inside of the box. Now before I show how to connect this to everything else, I actually did open mine up and take it apart so I could see everything that's within here. So this is the circuit board itself. You can see where the SIM slot is on it. You can see the PCIe and the M.2 slots on there. That's the connector on the back for connecting it to the reTerminal itself. But basically that is most of the functional components. What I have in my hand here is, this is the power over Ethernet module. It does unplug from the board, so I just took it out to take a quick look at it. And it just plugs right back into some connectors that are right next to the Ethernet slot. Now here's a close-up look at the board. Here you can see I have a PCIe slot connected to it, and you can make out where the M.2 slot would be on top of it. I want to point out that a little bit to the left of the fan there is a switch. You would use that switch to specify which one of these two connection options that you're using. Like I mentioned earlier, you can only use one or the other, but you cannot use both at the same time. Okay, so I'll plug the power over Ethernet back into the board, and let's get everything closed back up and connected to my reTerminal. So there are several screws that keep the circuit board itself connected to the back of the case. I don't think you want to see me screw all of those in, so let's cut some of this out. I am going to put an M.2 drive within mine. I decided to use this instead of the PCIe because this is much larger. The one that I'm using is a full terabyte in size. Now if I were adding the PCIe, it adds just as easily. You insert it into the slot, hold it down, and then put the screws in it. The PCIe drive that I have only was 64 gigs, so between 64 gigs and 1 terabyte, you can understand why I went with the 1 terabyte option. So with the drive held down, I needed to put the fan back in place. So here I snap it back into its holder and then plug the connector back into the circuit board. The other part of the case has a speaker on it, so here I plug it back in too. And then I put the two halves of the case back together. It kind of snaps in place, and once it's in place, there are 5 screws that go back into it. 4 of the screws go into the same holes that were used for holding the rubber feet. The last screw goes inside of the battery compartment. After the screws are back in place, I press the rubber feet back into their holes. If they don't go all the way, you can also turn them because the rubber feet are threaded, so you can turn them to get them back into the hole tighter. And now that the case is back together, I'm putting some 18650 batteries back in them. Now, these are some batteries I had salvaged from an old laptop. I have found these batteries are pretty effective, so I've used these on a number of different things. I probably made a mistake putting the batteries back in before connecting to the reTerminal. If I had to do this again, I would have connected it to the reTerminal and then installed the batteries. Because I'm thinking about it now, something just kind of seems strange with connecting it with it having a potentially live circuit to it. I mean, no damage was done, but just somehow in retrospect, this looks like a bad idea. On a reTerminal itself, I need to use remove the rubber feet from the back of the unit. And then I also need to remove the rubber piece covering the high-speed connector, since that's the point at which the E10-1 connects. So lining it up and pressing it together gets it electrically connected, but you still want to secure it. And so that's why there's the 2 holes on either side of the middle of the unit. So there's a couple of screws. We put those in place and we tighten them. And that takes care of the physical setup of the device. So that's it, the unit's put together. Now here you see the unit is turned on. And it seemed to have turned on automatically when I connected the E10-1 to it. I didn't realize that. If I dim the lightings here, then you can actually make out that the screen is in fact on. So this is part of the reason why I say in retrospect that probably was not the best of ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. Showing you the ports. On one side you can see the RS485 port at the top, and then the Type D port at the bottom. That is for the RS232. If we look on the other side, we can see that there are some status lights in addition to the Ethernet, which supports power over Ethernet, and a barrel jack for 12-volt input. So in testing the power over Ethernet out, as soon as I connect a powered Ethernet cable to it, you can see the status light show that the unit is turned on, and then there's another light that's flashing that shows that it is charging the batteries. And it pretty much has the same response if I plug a 12-volt power source into the barrel jack there. Turning it on works like it did before, where you just press the button on the top and it will power up. Software setup on the device was easier than I expected it to be. The device already recognizes the M.2 drive that I put within it. So here I start fdisk with /dev/sda1 in order to start partitioning the drive. That was the only thing I really needed to do in order for it to be able to start using the drive. When I tried to delete the partitions that were on there were no partitions, so of course that didn't work. So I created a new primary partition. It's partition number 1, and I just let this span the entirety of the drive. More times than not, I just am answering yes to these questions. And after specifying the right command, the disk has been partitioned and is pretty much available to use. So I run a quick format on it. So here I'm formatting the disk. Now I'm making a folder, and this folder is going to be used as the mount point for the drive that I created. And I forgot to use the sudo command here. So here I've mounted the drive to this specific path. And now when I change to this folder, this is going to show me what's on the drive. Just to make sure that I could write to it, I tried creating a file. First time it fails because I don't have permission to do that. So I just went ahead and I tried the same thing again, only I use sudo. Okay, so that works. And when I list the drives on the machine, we can see there's the M.2 that I put in at SDA1, and it shows the mount point for it. So now I need to change the owner of the drive so that I don't have to use sudo in order to do anything on it. Okay, so the owner's been changed, and now I should be able to create files on here without using the sudo command, and there it worked. I just created the file test2. Here I'm creating a fairly regular folder hierarchy that I have on many of my devices. And within here I'm going to clone the code that's available from SeeedStudio to assist in a software setup. This essentially takes care of installing some other drivers and settings. Now I will say somewhere during the course of this setup, somehow one of my screen settings was lost, specifically the touch rotation. I'll talk about that in a moment. So I run one of these scripts that is available for the reTerminal. This will perform some setup steps. I have not gone through to see exactly what all of this is doing. So with that done, the only thing that's left here is to reboot, and the device is otherwise ready to use. Now let's go back to that problem I was talking about. Now the problem concerns the touch screen. Somewhere during the course of the setup, my touchscreen processing got messed up, and so my X and my Y coordinates get swapped as it's processing my touches. So that's what you can see here. I had to do a lot of searching to figure out what's going on, and that's when I found out that all of the touches are being processed through a matrix. And you can update the matrix by using this command, and this command includes the new matrix that I wanted to use for touch processing. It does not work if you type it through SSH unless you also specify the display, which is what the second form of the command is for. Now you also need to use the second form of the command if you have this command being run at boot up or through some other process. Now I found a lot of ways to not schedule this to run on boot up, but let me show you the one that worked. The first thing, I had to use a cron job in order to get this to work. So you type this command in, do not use sudo because you want this to run as a user. So at the end of my file for the cron settings, I've attached the command there. You can see there's prefix to run at reboot, and I have a sleep for 5 seconds before the command attempts to run. After I put that in, on my next reboot, when I touched the screen, I did see that the touches were being properly processed. So that solved the only real problem I ran into setting this up. Now, if you like this content, would like to see more like it, I have it available both on my YouTube channel and on my Instagram page. And oftentimes you can find this information in written form on my blog at blog.j2i.net. Until next time.